We ask why we use this concept, why we invented this concept, how this concept have emerged, why do we use this concept, how they come up, how comes this notion. So is that this is a theoretical discipline. It's not an empirical discipline. It's a theoretical discipline. It's the history of political thought because it's about thought. So this theoretical discipline looks at the notion. You have to understand the notions, the concepts. Why it's so important? Because when you want to talk about politics, you will use some words instead of other words. And these words are not just words. They are concepts. They are notions. They have a theory within them. And so you have to understand why you use these words instead of other words. Because it's crucial. Change words, everything change. The meaning of reality change. And even the reality change according to how you describe it through words. So, political thought asks, what form of government should take and why? What duties citizens owe to legitimate government, if any? And when it might be legitimate, overthrown the political power, if ever. So, let's see it again. We will see what form the government should take, which form of government is better according to which criteria. Is better to live under a monarchy, under a liberal democracy, under a republic, under a religious state, under a socialist state, and so on and so forth. Citizens. So the citizens, which rights and which duties should citizens have? What the citizens must do, what are the obligations that the citizens have towards the political power, and when is the case that the citizens can legitimately resist to the power of the state and try to overthrow the government, for example. The history of political thought aims to define, explain, and clarify the concept employed in politics. We already saw. Let's see another definition by Klosko, which you will find many documents, many texts from this author to study political thought. I will upload it online. So, political thought focuses on the nature and purpose of human association. So it focuses on why humans, first of all, we have decided to live together, to associate, to live in a society, communities in society, and not as individual, isolated. We decided to live together. And then we decided to live together as human beings, and then also to establish a government, a political power, to make the community or the society works better. Why? Why we made this decision? Human beings must cooperate in order to survive. Our moral and intellectual faculties can develop only in association with other people. So here it is explained why we decided to live together and not in isolation. So we decided to live together, and problems of communal life have been apparent since society first arose. Some of these are obvious: how to preserve order, how to protect the weak from the strong, how to provide a common defense, how to care for those who are unable to care for themselves. But more fundamental questions must also be addressed, including the overall goals that the community should pursue. So we live together, we decide to live together because human beings work better together. Human beings think living together is improving their abilities. Living together means establishing an organization. Establishing an organization means establishing a form of political power. But which goals should this political power pursue? This is one question. And to address this question, we will see that we have different ideologies. Liberalism, protect individual rights. Democracy, promote equality. Nationalism, protect the nation, and so on and so forth. Socialism, to protect social rights and social equality, and so on and so forth. Let's see more about this Klosko's definition of the history of political thought. More than helping us to understand our origins, the history of political thought gives us essential insights into the reason why we hold our present views. The history of political thought is the intellectual root of our own political ideas, part of what makes us what we are. By coming to understand a range of possible answers to general political questions and the assumption through which they stem, we become more clear about our own ideas. We are able to understand the theoretical foundation of our views on particular questions that concern us as citizens, and so able to move beyond conceiving of them as given or inevitable. Our political ideas are human creations, and so subject to critical assessment. Only when we examine possible alternatives to our own ideas are we able not only to understand and criticize them, but also to accept them. So, what we try to do is try to understand why we got to this point. Why we got to this point. Like, for example, we got to a point in which all over the world we live through nation states. And you know, the world is ruled by different nation states. Right now, nowadays we have this problem of the war. The war is between states mostly. So we want to understand why we got to this point that we live through states. What were the main alternatives to this way of living together? And so as to better evaluate if nowadays we are using the best form of living together politically and what could be the alternatives. The history of political thought analyzes the evolution of human thoughts about political problems over time. So, as I already said, let's go again through the questions we're going to address in this course. What are the meaning and objectives of politics? What does it mean, politics? We will start with this very question. What is the origin of the word politics? What does it serve for? How should human beings live in commons? Why do we need politics? What is justice? What is the best way to order human affairs and human cooperations? So, this is more or less what the history of political thought is in general. Okay, so you will find some on the Microsoft team you will find some texts who go through these elements. It's just five pages about a book which is History of Political Theory by George Glasgow. We will find on Microsoft team about what is the history of political thought. This is in general the history of political thought. Right now, let's see more specifically about these course of history of political thought. My course of history of political thought, okay? So as I told you, myself, I'm Federico Tomasello. So my email is federico.tomasello. Yeah, unfortunately, slides is not working, but let's say that my course is divided in five parts. The first part is the first 2 weeks. We're gonna go straight away through antiquity and the Middle Ages. So we will look in the first part, in the first 2 weeks, we will look at the Greeks, Romans, and Middle Ages until Niccolò Machiavelli, until the end of the Middle Ages. Then, the second part will be about early modernity. How do we go from Middle Ages to modernity, early modernity, and what were the main problems, the theories that brought up to what we call Enlightenment and social contract theories. This is part 2, so early modernity. Then we have the full modernity part, which is the 18th and 19th century. Then we have the 20th century, the last century, the century of the global wars, the century of the totalitarianism, and so on. And then the part 5, we will go through our present. On our present, we will focus on something specific, which is that our present is a global present, is a post-colonial present. And now we will see how and why. And this fifth part will be much more interactive. Okay? So let's go on the details. Part 1. Part 1 of the course will be on the antiquity and the Middle Ages. So we will go on a long span of time since 500 years before Christ, since the dawn of the Western civilization in the ancient Greece to 1500. to the end of the Middle Ages. So we will go through antiquity and the Middle Ages. We will go through the Greek civilization, the Roman civilization, and the long period of the Middle Ages, which is one period of 1,000 years from the fall of the Roman Empire until the early modernity, which was a period dominated by the religious power, by the Roman Catholic Church, by the Holy Roman Empire. So long time in history. And what are the main concepts we will understand through this first part, which is antiquity and the Middle Ages? We will see the concepts that were central for the ancient civilization, which is first of all the idea of republic and republicanism. What does it mean, republic, and what does it mean to be a republican? What does it mean, the political ideology of republicanism? This is a political ideology which is centered on the idea of political virtue. What does it mean, political virtue? Then we will see what does it mean, the idea of citizenship. The idea of citizenship which was invented in the ancient Greece and that we still use nowadays to describe the belonging to a political community. So this will be the main concept you will understand through the ancient civilization. The Romans, the Greeks, they focused very much on the republic, political virtue, and on the idea of citizenship. Then we will see the debate, which is what should be the mutual relationship between political power and religious power, because this was the main thing in the Middle Ages, because the religious power dominated over the political power. So we will see the mutual relationship between religious power and political power, which also means what is the relationship between ethics and politics, between moral and politics. And we will see the difference between idealism and realism, which are the very two different ways to approach political thought, to approach political theory. So we will see the difference between idealism and realism. This will be the first part until the end of the Middle Ages. Then second part will be focusing on early modernity. 1400, 1500, 1600. So this is the moments in which we see that the Middle Ages ends. We have new things. We have the discovery of America, the idea that we understand the world is the world that we know nowadays. We have scientific revolution. We have big transport. We have a split in the church. So we enter in the modern era, and entering in the modern era means the effort to develop a new form of political power which didn't exist before and which is very so important nowadays, which means the invention of the states. So we will focus on this period that goes from the 15th century to the 18th century in order to understand the idea of the state. How we invented the state and how we conceived the state, through the idea of the social contract. The idea that the state is the result of a social contract that the people, the government, accept to live through each, and that establish a very important notion, which is the notion of sovereignty. We have a state if we have sovereignty. So we will try to understand this concept of sovereignty. So sovereignty is what establishes the state. But then you have this authority of the state, but then immediately another question remains. So what is liberty for an individual if we have a political power? What should be the limit of this political power that we call liberty? And we will go through the definition of freedom, and especially the difference between what we call negative freedom and what we call positive freedom. The meaning of government, what should be the limits of government? What should be the duties of government, the objectives of government, how government should look like. And so the idea of the separation of power, the idea of the rule of law, and so we will understand the foundation of the Enlightenment, the foundations of the Enlightenment, which is still the basis of contemporary Western civilization, the ideas of the Enlightenment. So the second part, we will see this slow construction of the basic ideas of the state, of the basic ideas of the rule of law, of the separation of power, the foundation of liberalism, of democracy, and so on. This is so the second part. The second part will focus on this social contract, invention of the state, and the foundations of the modern ideas. But then, after we have all these nice ideas, we go to the third part. The third part means when these ideas become reality. How do they become reality? Through major historical events. These historical events, we call them revolutions. We call them revolutions, and we enter to the third part of the course by analyzing the biggest revolution that gave birth to the world as we know it is nowadays. The French Revolution, the American Revolution, and the Industrial Revolution. So we will understand, this was the first time that revolution came in history and became a way to transform the world. This revolution, for example, established new ideas as institutional and political realities, like the idea of nation, the idea of individual rights. They also gave birth to new political ideologies, to new political doctrines like socialism, and also to the consolidation of the idea of liberalism, conservatism, and the Industrial Revolution also gave birth to something very important for politics nowadays, which is capitalism, which is how society is governed through the market, through market exchange. So capitalism. So this third part we will focus on this revolution of the 18th century and how they consolidated through the 19th century, 1800. Part 4, we will focus on the 20th century. 20th century was the past century. It was a century in which we had some problems, because we had two global wars. We had totalitarianism, we had concentration camps, we had, fascism, Nazism, totalitarianism, the idea of nihilism, and so on. But we also have something new coming up, like the idea of the welfare state, the idea of social justice, of redistribution, and the build of bureaucracy as the form to which the state exercises power. So this is part 4. Let's say this fourth part, let's go again through this fourth part. Part 1 is antiquity and the Middle Ages. Part 2 is early modernity, social contract, the invention of the state. Part 3 is modern revolution in the 18th century and 19th century. Part 4 is the 20th century. Okay, so past century. These are the 4 parts. Part 5 is where you as students jump into the courts as kind of teachers. Why? Because the part 5, I call it post-colonial and global political thought. So far we have just only talked about history, about matters of history, matters of time, this division of the history in its different ages, antiquity, Middle Ages, and modernity. But let's talk about geography now. Let's talk about spaces. So we call it history of political thought, but actually what we learn here is the history of European political thought. We will mostly focus on European thinkers, so European books, or a history of Western political thought, as we will also consider the American Revolution. We will also consider some American philosophers from the United States, especially in the last part. Okay, so this is how history of political thought is taught and is studied all over the world. It focuses on Western ideas, European ideas, because we as European, we have focused more on some concepts which were born in Europe, like the idea of sovereignty was born in Europe, the idea of individual rights were born in Europe, liberalism, socialism, democracy, conservatism, all European ideas. And this is why we focus on European and Western ideas. But still, now we live more and more in a global age, in a global present. In this global present, the Western civilization through which we're gonna understand the foundation of this civilization in this course, but is not anymore, the only leader in the world. We see a global war, and what happened. One of the most important things that happened in the past century, in the 20th century, is decolonization, meaning that the decolonization of the Western society over the rest of the world ended. We have struggles for independence, and we have new ideas coming from non-Western parts of the world. So last part of the course will focus on this idea that we want to go through a post-colonial history of political thought, global history of political thought, world history of political thought. And so we have to incorporate tradition of thought and ideas coming from non-Western societies. So this is the last part of course, and this will end with a conference that we will organize together, and we will have some presentation by professors and some presentation by you as students. So I wanted to show you what we did last year, but the sheet is not working. So tomorrow I hope we will have this working probably in another room. But yeah, last year the course ended. The last day of the course ended with this conference we called Democracy and Power, a global forum on governance. So we are going to show you the video. It was very nice. So we did a conference, and this was because during the course, during the classes, the students were increasingly asking this question. They say, yeah, we think that democracy is a good thing in itself, but maybe it's just the Western that want to impose this idea of democracy over other civilization. But is democracy the best way of governing? Is democracy working for real as democracy? Is giving power to the people for real, or is just an illusion and is ruled by elites? So on this we had contributions from the students who were bringing their different views. For example, we had the Vietnamese students who were bringing, the specific situation of Vietnam, which is a communist country and has only one party, so technically it's not democratic, but I think that one is more democratic because the government works for the people, because it's a communist government. Then we have a student from Ethiopia that presented, the different kind of institution and of governance that was developed in Africa for many centuries before colonization. So the Gada system, how it worked, political institutions worked in Africa before colonization and beyond the colonization. We had some contributions about, the different tradition of political thought which are not Western. For example, Confucianism. Confucianism is a long story of political thought which dominated in some parts of Asia, much more than what we have. So what we're gonna do is opening up. It's opening up. So the fifth part will be about this post-colonial and global, and we will focus on organizing this final conference in which you are supposed those of you who wants are supposed to make short presentation, like 5-10 minutes, about some ideas that shapes the history of the country where you come from, because most of you are non-Europeans. So I'm very interested, and in this sense, it's not European. So, and in this sense, it's a good thing, because me as a professor, I will learn something from you, from you, and I will try to open up my view beyond the European and Western point of view only. So we will try, we will try to have some fun also in doing this course. Why a course must be always boring? University must be always boring. We will try to organize a conference together, and to bring your origins, your countries within the thing. So the conference will be 7 and or 8 of May. 7 or 8 of May. So this can be 2 days or can be 1 day. When we will have slides, I will show you how we organized last year. We will do it together with the students of the third year, which were very happy last year to organize the conference, and I think they want to be part of it this year too. So this will be. Right now we're gonna look at the calendar of the course, but before we start, so I introduce myself. Now is your turn to introduce yourself. So as I said, I'm Federico Tomasello. I come from Florence, and this is my 4th year in this university. So now I want to hear your voices, and I also need one thing. I need somebody who gives me one paper, and you fill this paper with your name, surname, and nationality. So please, name and where you're from. And also, if you want to say something about what view you have on the political thought of your country, so if you think your country has something to say about it.
Hello, my name is Mara Kibuk. Beruk.
Mara Beruk.
Yeah, you can just call me Maki. I'm from Ethiopia. I'm a 2nd year student. Political thought, I think that our country has a long history and a long-standing presence in history in politics, so I'm sure like we could have some thoughts, because we also changed from like socialism to democracy at some point, and before that it was aristocracy. Like, we have a long history, so I think we do have some parts in it.
So aristocracy was Haile Selassie.
Huh?
No, Haile Selassie.
Yes, and before him
It was aristocracy.
Monarchy.
Monarchy, yeah.
Monarchy, yeah.
Monarchy.
Yeah. Before him as well, we have a long history of kings and queens and emperors, and so it was really hard to change quickly into a constitutional monarchy, and then from there socialism, a dictatorship, and then from there into a more transitional government. So,
but Haile Selassie, is he God?
He was good on some points, not good
God.
on others. Huh?
God.
He's with God?
He's God. He is God.
I
But
don't
according
know.
to Bob Marley, he's God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Son of God, yeah.
Yeah, because he trained in Jamaica when he went there.
Yeah, when he
Yeah.
landed, yeah, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah, but was a good ruler or not?
Sometimes no.
I see.
50-50.
I see.
Yes.
I was ruling according to Western, let's say, institutions, or
No, on paper he was ruling in order to appease the West. He had a constitution, but the constitution stated that he had all the power, even his like chambers, the two chambers, Chamber of Deputy and Senate. They were basically his puppets. There was limited democracy, limited rights to.
I'm from India. I'm a 2nd year student, and of course India has a long-standing history of colonialism, and I think we have multiple gods, but
I know, but which one?
I myself, it's a strong believer of Lord Shiva and
Shiva.
Lord Krishna. Yeah.
Lord Krishna. Yeah, I mean, that's so interesting because, India, the Veda, so we start thinking Western civilization like 500 years before Christ. Veda, 8,000 years before Christ, right?
Yes,
Veda,
Vedas
yeah.
is the oldest text.
It's the oldest text. I mean, it's so much older.
Vedas
so
and Puranas.
you have, the Upanishad 500 years before Christ, and you have Yoga Sutra, Patanjali, and
Yes.
so on. So this is such a strong history. They have, in India, you have different problems that, because we in Western, we focus more on governance, the state, and so on, whilst Indian philosophy is more focused on this, on the self, maybe. But yeah, so I please start thinking about what you could present, because this would be very, very, very interesting for our conference and the Indian civilization. Also in India, you have a founding father of post-colonial political thought, which is Mahatma Gandhi, who started to.
I might interrupt. I don't myself consider Mahatma Gandhi as the father of the nation, because he really wasn't. I mean, international wise, yes, he did some stuff. I myself don't really believe that we could have achieved freedom with just non-violence. It's a very utopian idea. He and Jawaharlal Nehru.
What?
Jawaharlal Nehru was the first Prime Minister of India. I don't necessarily think they were of a good pair.
What was the other name? What is the other name? The other
Mahatma
guy?
Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru. They were
Who
both.
was the prime minister? Which
Yes,
one?
yes.
Because what we have, we will start studying these post-colonial ideas in the 5th part. So, what is post-colonial ideas is the fact that at some moment in the 20th century, some nations started to fight for independence against their colonization. their colonization. This nation went in civil war against the empires that they were colonizing. And with this struggle, in these revolutions, we also had political thinkers who established new theories based on ending colonization. So they are post-colonial theorists. So we have, like, for example, Algeria was fighting a very tough war against France as colonizers. And there was this guy who was a psychiatrist, black psychiatrist, Frantz Fanon, who wrote two important books about post-colonial, about being free from the colonies. Also Gandhi, he made some theories about this. He made some theories, so we also consider a kind of philosopher somehow, even though you don't like it, but we still consider a philosopher. Frantz Fanon, we consider it a philosopher. You know, in Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh, he took socialism, he wanted to get independence from France. He wanted to get independence from France, but it was very difficult because Vietnam was dominated, and so what he did, he took socialism, he took Marxism, and he adapted to the Vietnamese context in order to fight a anti-colonial war. So we have all these we call it post-colonial theorists, all these thinkers which were also politicians who were fighting for independence and who made new theories about post-colonies and post-colonials. So, next one, because now it's late, but then we have Luisa Allegria, who is my intern. So we will have some, the last point is about internships, but I don't know, Luisa, say something about your country or yourself.
About Chile?
Yeah.
I'm from Chile, from in South America. We started our independence from Spain as a dictatorship. I mean, they say there was the president, but he killed the other two guys that helped, Chile get independence, and then named himself the Supreme Director.
Okay, so let's talk about Luisa. Now Luisa is here because she already took the exam. She was here last year in the course, but she's my intern. So I'm offering internships in order to support the courts. You're interested? Yeah. So I'm offering. Okay, that doesn't work this way. It works. You send me an email. Okay. Midterm exam. Yeah. Tomorrow we're gonna discuss all the details about the courts, but midterm exam is gonna be last week of March. Okay. Last week of March. Or 1st of April, just before the break, okay? So either last week of March or 1st week of April. But tomorrow we're going through the details of this, okay? Ciao, ciao, see you tomorrow. Thanks for your attention.